Thanks for joining me for episode 40 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. This is episode number 18 of season 2, and today I'll be joined by 6 other educators who stepped up to share ideas, tips, and technology applications for supporting students with special needs during remote learning.
I'm Dr. Sheldon L. Akins from the Leading Equity Podcast and a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hello, duct tapers! I am so glad that you're here today. My name is Jake, and I'm here to talk to you about duct tape and educational technology and how, in my goofy mind, the two things go together to create an ed tech integration mindset that I think can help you get through the stress and dig through the overwhelming mass of ed tech tools to use in your kitchen, dining room, remote learning environment, I guess. I normally say classrooms there. I didn't know what to say. Speaking of remote learning, I hope that you, your family, your friends, heck, your enemies, your colleagues, and your students are all happy, healthy, and safe. These are tough times, but we will get through it together. I hope you're doing well. Because of this crazy situation we're in, it has been nearly 1 month since my last regular, quote unquote, as regular as this show ever gets, regular episode of the podcast, and it'll be another 2 weeks until we really get back to normal. I had originally thought that today would be back to normal, but I feel like there is a question out there that is not being addressed, at least I'm not seeing it addressed, and that's, how are we supporting our students with special needs during remote learning? Special needs is a vague term, and it covers a lot of ground, and I want to leave it that way for this episode so that we can cover a wide range of needs here. Language needs, speech needs, comprehension needs, vision needs, attention needs, hearing needs, whatever. So today we're going to hear from 6 educators about some ideas and tips for what we could do for those students. Next week, we'll get back to some educational duct tape normalcy, again, as normal as educational duct tape ever is. As usual, we'll have a mini episode and a Twitter chat on Wednesday, April 8th. Then, the following week, Wednesday the 15th, we'll be back to normal as I feature an interview with the amazing and incredible Caitlin Tucker. I'm sure that today will not be the last mention of remote learning or the coronavirus on this show, but it'll be the last time, I hope, that it's a focal point. I'm excited to get back to business as usual. I bet that you will be too. A reminder that, as with all of my regular episodes, listening today makes you eligible for a certificate of listening, laughing, and learning that you could turn into your school for professional development credits. I can't guarantee that they'll accept it, but I have heard from some duct tapers who are getting credit for it. And you know what? I've got to be honest with you guys. I've been kind of torn about whether to continue doing these certificates or not, because we know from the work of Dan Pink and some other different people out there that humans are most motivated when they have autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And we're most motivated by intrinsic rewards, not extrinsic rewards, right? So I'm giving you an extrinsic certificate to reward you for listening to the show. But that's really not what I'm trying to do. I'm really not trying to pull you in and reward you for listening. I'm just trying to be nice to you. Like you've got to get these credits for your school to renew your license or whatever it might be. And I feel like this should count as a way to get credits for you. So you're already here. So I'm giving you the certificates. This isn't me trying to pull in more listeners, because trust me, it's not working. This is just me trying to be nice to you. You're already here listening. I might as well give you certificates for it so you can get those credits that you deserve. I mean, you are learning by listening. I hope you're learning by listening. So anyhow, as I was saying, I can't guarantee that your school will accept it for professional development credits, but I do know of some duct tapers who are and have been getting credit for it. So if you want a certificate, you'll go to eduducttape.com/certificate. That's eduducttape.com/certificate. But you'll need the super secret code that I share later in this episode. And for those of you that might hate when I whisper the super secret code, just jump forward 30 seconds or something and ignore it. But I know some of you enjoy trying to predict what I'll use as the code every episode. Also, another reminder, I want to offer my help and support to you or the educators that you work with during these tough times. If you or your colleagues need help with any remote or distance or home learning technology, I would be happy to jump on a Google Hangout or Meet or Zoom or whatever with you or them to help. I've got some appointment slots available at calendly.com/JakeMillerTech. That's CALENDLY.com/JakeMillerTech. No strings attached. I just put a bunch of 20-minute time slots in there. I just want to help. I don't have any special remote learning expertise per se, but I've got plenty of opinions and ideas, and sometimes it's just nice to have someone to listen to you and say, yeah, that's rough, or wow, you're doing an awesome job. I'm cool with being that guy for any of you duct tapers that need it, so feel free to grab a slot if you're interested. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. I've got a little quarantine teaching or coronavirus homeschool teaching story for you. On our first day of home learning, my kids and I made some daily checklists for them. Each kid got to identify the things that they were required by their teachers to do and a few things that they'd like to add in. So they include things like free reading and spelling that they're expected to do, Wii video or Scratch that they've elected to do, and physical activity and outside play that I've identified for them. I even made a checklist for me that includes stuff that I'm working on. I wanted them to know that I'm not just home as dad, I've got work to do too. Anyhow, we keep those checklists in sheet protectors and mark things off using dry erase markers. One day, the dry erase marker was out of ink. The kids raced away to grab our backup, but I stopped them. I told them it was time for a science experiment about centrifugal force. I grabbed some twine and some tape and attached the dry erase marker. You probably have seen the video out there on Twitter before. By spinning the marker like a lasso, the centrifugal force sends all of the ink to the tip of the marker, so it's ready to write for a while longer. So I swung it around like a cowboy. Then my daughter tried it, and my youngest son tried it. My oldest kiddo decided it was lame and didn't participate. Anyhow, when we went to try it out, we discovered that it was getting ink all over our hands, and it was like running out of the tip. I think that we had gotten a little overzealous with our swinging. A day later, I was resting on the couch and noticed some dark spots on the ceiling. What is that? I wondered. Later, I noticed some dark spots on the wall above our TV. What the? I thought. Then it dawned on me. My eyes widened. I got up and looked closer. Sure enough, both sets of dots were blue. I turned to my wife's beloved white couches and, to my horror, there were dozens, if not hundreds, of the little dots. They were small enough that we had gone 24 hours without noticing them, but now that I knew they were there, they were impossible to ignore. Science fail, dad fail, homeschool fail, quarantine teaching fail. And before you say it, I did have the cap on. It leaked right through the cap. I'm not dumb enough to not have the cap on, guys. I know you were thinking that. So why am I telling you about this? So that you can laugh at me? No. Well, maybe a little. You deserve a chuckle after all the work you've put in these last few weeks. But I'm really telling you so that I could tell you this. Sometimes it just doesn't go according to plans. Sometimes you spin the dry erase marker like you're in a movie with John Wayne or a music video with Lil Nas X, and you end up with marker spots all over your living room. Sometimes, like the person in the video that circulated on Twitter, you don't end up with spots everywhere. You end up with a viral video that everyone is psyched about. There's no way to know which will happen until you try. There's another lesson here, too. When I noticed the spots, I stood staring at the wall and ceiling with my face looking aghast. I said, uh-oh. My wife said, What? What are you doing? Are there bugs flying around the room? What are you staring at? When I announced what I was staring at, I couldn't help but laugh while I said it out loud. When April said, Is it on the couches? I said, and the kids quickly turned their attention from me to her to see her response. And her response? She laughed. And then the kids laughed. And then we all laughed. And as wives tend to do, she then posted it on Facebook, and now everyone we know is laughing, and now you're laughing. But there was a time in my life when that laughter would have made me want to curl up in a ball and hide. But not now. Why? I'm just not taking myself too seriously. So when you take these risks, when you spin around your dry erase marker and don't know if you'll end up with blue spots or a working marker, be prepared to fail and be prepared to laugh. And when you're the person on the other end, like my wife was, be prepared to say, like, you know what? You didn't mean to get blue spots all over the couch. That's pretty stinking funny. Instead of being mad at you, I'm going to laugh. When you do a Zoom lesson with your students, or record your first video on Screencastify, or try to make memes for your students to see on quizzes, be prepared to fail. And if you do, don't beat yourself up about it. Laugh. learn, and move on. And when your own kids or your colleagues, their teachers maybe, when they try something new out during this experience and it doesn't go according to plan, don't be mad at them or frustrated with them. Maybe laugh, but understand they were just trying something new, right? And so when I ended up with those blue spots all over the place, I didn't beat myself up about it. Laugh, learn, move on. And I learned if I ever try that again, I'll go outside. And guess what? We had a plan B. That's the other part here. That's another important thing. Have your plan B, maybe even C. We have furniture insurance or whatever they call it, so it'll get cleaned. And we have a backup marker. We're all good. So we're going to transition into having a little bit of fun now because times have been tough these last couple weeks, and so you guys deserve a laugh. So we're going to play some Which of the Following Would Be Less Torturous. In a moment, I'm going to grab my 6-year-old son, Beckett, who's going to have a little bit of fun with me listening to some Duct Taper's responses to a question he asked. We'll listen to 3 or 4 of them, and then we'll get into the actual educational duct tape content for that. And then we'll take a break later in the episode to listen to 3 or 4 more with Beckett. So if you want to laugh, stay tuned. If you are not in the mood for giggling, which seriously, who's not in the mood for giggling, skip forward about 6.5 minutes. You'll get to the actual learning content. But seriously, let's have a little bit of fun. So again, we're going to bring Beckett in. We're going to listen to 3 or 4 of these responses, have some fun listening to his responses to their responses, laugh a little bit, and then we'll get to the learning. If you don't want to hear the giggling, jump forward about 6.5 minutes and we'll get right to the meat of the episode. But come on, let's have some fun, guys.
Which of these things do you consider to be less torturous?
Okay, I've got my 6-year-old son, Beckett, here with me, and we're going to listen to some Which of the Following Would Be Less Torturous answers. Are you ready, Beckett?
Yeah. Hi.
Are you ready?
Hi.
Hi. Are you going to say anything other than hi?
No.
Okay, let's listen to your first question. You ready?
Yes.
Yes, he said yes.
Maybe?
Maybe.
Which of the following would be less torturous? Being a giant stink bug or being a really tiny elephant?
I absolutely 100% would be a giant stink bug. Oh, my name is Jennifer Pearson, by the way. And I think that would just be awesome because you could go around and wreak havoc with your spindly little legs and crush things, and everyone would be scared of you because you would stink and make a mess and crawl up tall buildings. So, rawr.
All right, Beckett, so that was Jennifer Pearson, and I'm going to tell the listeners who Jennifer is later in the episode when she shares some awesome knowledge with everybody. But Jennifer picked to be a stink bug, and what the listeners couldn't hear is on her video, she had actually given herself some stink bug antenna. What did you think of her antenna that she had?
Good, but at the end, with you saying raw, I'm just going to tell you that stink bugs do not say raw.
What do they say?
I don't know.
They don't know. They definitely don't say roar, though. I think you're right. You should be a science teacher.
Even though I don't know that much science.
I think you know a lot of science. You know that stink bugs don't roar. More than Jennifer knows, right?
And I think so. They don't stink that much.
I don't think they stink that much either, but you and your brother were just excited to ask questions about stink bugs.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, let's listen to another answer.
Hello there, Edgy Duct Tapers and Beckett. My name is also Jake Miller. Not to be confused with your dad, he is also a handsomely bearded, intelligent, very vociferous, and active teacher. I'm an 8th grade teacher who teaches social studies in Pennsylvania, and I feel it would be less torturous to be a giant stink bug, because if I were a tiny elephant, all of my friends would make fun of me. Ah!
Beckett, did you hear what that guy's name was?
Yeah, that's really freaky.
That his name's Jake Miller?
Yeah.
And he said that I was handsome. Did you hear that part?
Yeah, but I don't know about your handsome.
You're not sure if I'm handsome? You're a stinker.
April Fools.
April Fools, I am handsome. So it's a little bit weird that he's a guy named Jake Miller and he's answering the question on Jake Miller's podcast, and it kind of weirded us out. I wonder if he has a son named Beckett.
Do you?
Do you? Jake, you'll have to let us know. Do you? What did you think of his answer about he'd be sad if he was a tiny elephant because his friends would be mean to him and make fun of him?
Weird and a bit freaky.
Weird and a bit freaky? Do you think that if one of your friends turned into a tiny elephant, would you make fun of them?
Maybe.
What?
Maybe not. Maybe not.
I hope you wouldn't make fun of your tiny elephant friend.
I would just do this dance.
Beckett's doing a dance. That's the tiny elephant dance right there? Okay, goofy boy. Let's listen to another one.
Even though you can't see me.
Hey Duct Tapers, this is Pam Hubler, or Special Techie on Twitter, and I would have to say I think it would be less torturous to be a tiny elephant, because no one wants to stink, and I mean it would be way better than carrying a little dog around, so I think that would be why.
So Becca, what did you think of Pam's answer?
Pretty good and kind of weird.
What was the weird part?
About carrying the dog around.
Yeah, so there are some people who, when they have a little dog, they carry it around in a purse, and the dog, like, pokes his head out. And I think Pam thinks that if she was a tiny elephant, some of her friends might carry her around in their purse, and then she'd be the tiny elephant peeking out of the purse.
Kind of freaky.
Kind of freaky? If one of your friends turned into a tiny elephant, would you carry them around in your backpack?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I probably would kidnap them.
You'd kidnap your tiny elephant friend?
April Fools.
April Fools! Oh, you're a trickster, Beck. We're gonna stop doing these questions now. Will you come back in a little bit to answer some more with me?
Yes, I will. You want to do more?
You want to do more? Okay, he's thumping his chest like Tarzan right now because he wants to do more. You crazy, crazy man. Okay, we'll see you in a little bit, Beck. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that little visit from my buddy Beckett. He is a trip. I often think that, this is going to seem completely disconnected here, but I often think that muffins are just cupcakes without the icing. And we say that Beckett, our third kid, was the icing on our family. Like, we didn't really need a third one, but he is the icing on the family. He just adds that extra bit of flavor because he is a fun kid. He's a blast to have around. As you could tell there, he's very, very, very goofy, very goofy. So he'll be back later in the show to listen to the other three, which of the following would be less torturous questions. I hope you guys enjoyed those three, and I hope you'll enjoy the three later. But now we have got a bunch of great content to dive into. And the question that I wanted to ask today, as I alluded to earlier in the episode, is one that I've been wondering why I haven't been hearing more about, and that is, how are we supporting students with special needs during remote learning? And somebody did ask this question during the hashtag EDU Duct Tape chat last week as a question they'd like to hear, but it was already on my mind as well, because these students, they're getting supports in our classrooms, and sometimes it's not as much as they need, but they're getting supports in our classrooms and schools from intervention specialists or from OTs or PTs or I should explain my abbreviations, occupational therapists or physical therapists or whatever it might be, speech and language pathologists, whatever these specialists might be that are supporting them. And now some of those connections might not be there. Maybe those educators aren't tech savvy. Maybe those educators aren't able to fulfill the duties that they have, over distance learning. Maybe a whole lot of different things. And maybe their home situations aren't fantastic and they're not getting the support that they need at home. So how can we support those students? So my thought was, how can we, not necessarily in a formal kind of way, like how can we make sure we're meeting all of our required minutes and things like that? Because I'm not a lawyer, definitely not a special ed lawyer, and I really can't tell you that kind of stuff. What I want to know is, when we think about the supports that we give these kids in our classrooms, whether we're legally required to or not, when we know a kid has some kind of special need and we modify or accommodate or differentiate for these kids, how can we do it in these new remote learning settings? Because it is difficult. So that's the question I put out there. And I had, I believe, 6 people respond, something like that. And some of them responded multiple times because they had so many awesome things to share. And at first, before I edited this together, I was thinking, I'm going to end up eliminating some of these because they're going to be repetitious, certainly. And they really were not repetitious. These people all shared lots of awesome stuff. So you're going to hear a lot of different things come at you. And I don't want you to try to process and do all of them right now. I want you maybe even pause after I say this sentence. I want you to think about the students that you deal with in your role and think about the special needs that you have. not that you have, but that you have in your classroom, in your care? What special needs do you need to meet? Do you have kids that maybe struggle with reading, or that struggle with writing, or that struggles with typing, or that struggle with processing directions, or what are the needs that you have in your classroom? And then as we go through this long list of awesome things, kind of have those light bulb moments. Oh, that's the one that I need for this kid. That's the one I need for this student. That's what I need for all of my students, whatever it might be, as you go through it. And maybe revisit this list over and over again. I've also got to tell you, before we dig into it, I curated the heck out of everything everybody said, and I made what I consider to be meticulous show notes for this episode. I've already made them, and I'm going to go through and add links to them as we actually go through and listen to all the things that the people say. So if you hear somebody say something, the name of it and probably a link to it, and maybe even like a sentence or two about it, are definitely in the show notes. So please make sure you click on that link to go to the show notes so that you can see exactly what that person was talking about. So let's dive into it. We're going to start off with Jennifer Pearson. Now, Jennifer, I specifically reached out to get her perspective on this because Jennifer was one of the first educators I heard talking about remote learning in the age of the coronavirus pandemic. And that's because she was on an episode of Shake Up Learning a while back. Casey Bell featured her on the show. Jennifer is originally from Texas, and that I believe is how she knows Casey. But Jennifer teaches in China at a school there, international school, and she'll mention that school in her response here. But she had to move home in, I believe, January or maybe even December at the winter break because of the outbreak there. And so she is ahead of us in this game of remote learning. And so I said, Jennifer, I loved what you shared on Casey's show. I loved what you shared in a blog on Casey's site. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about how to support learners with special needs. And she said, sure, I would love to. And she really hit it out of the park with 6 or 7 different awesome things. So here is Jennifer Pearson.
Hi, Jake. This is Jennifer Pearson. I'm an instructional technology specialist from the International School of Nanshan, Shenzhen in China. And I wanted to tell you about guided access on an iPad or an iPhone. So this is a great tool that teachers can share with parents for parents to use at home during this time to help keep kids focused and stay on target. It's so easy for kids to kind of, wander off. I have a 4th grader and I catch her wandering off sometime from her lesson that she's supposed to be doing while she's here at home whenever I'm not watching. So I like to use guided access. And so what you can do is on an iPad or an iPhone, you go to your settings and you'll see a setting called accessibility. And you'll look for where it says guided access, and you'll turn that on, and you'll want to set a passcode for that. And once you have that accessibility turned on, then anytime you want to start guided access, you just click the sound button and the power button 4 times at the same time, and that will lock them into whatever app you're on when you click that 4 times. And they cannot get out of that unless an adult enters their passcode. So great for whenever they're doing their assignment on Seesaw or on Google Classroom. You can lock them into that app and they cannot get out of the app unless an adult enters their passcode.
Great tip there, Jennifer. This is actually something that I've used with my own kiddos when they're using iPads, and I want to make sure that they're staying within the app that they've gotten permission to use it on. And this does work across all iOS devices, so it'll work on your iPhone and your iPod Touches if you still have those around and things like that too. A quick thought about what Jennifer shared here. You might not have access to the iPads that the kids are using. They might even be school-owned iPads, and so maybe you can't actually put this in play yourself, but this could be something that you might want to send home to parents. Maybe find the link that I put in the show notes and send parents the instructions for how to do that. Tell them it's not a requirement, but if you're having a problems keeping tabs on your kids while they're doing their schoolwork, especially because the parents might have work of their own to be doing at the same time, this might be a good thing to do. But that's not all that Jennifer shared. She had more awesomeness to share, so let's hear more of it.
Also, I would advise a timer, and sometimes that's a timer for kids who sit in front of the computer too long, like my older daughter, who tries to get too much done, and then she just ends up kind of staring mindlessly at the computer. And then sometimes you might need a timer for the little ones who want to get up after 2 minutes and say that they've done enough. So a timer can go for longer times or shorter times. And then there's a great app that I heard about on Shooks and GIF called Hatch. And Hatch lets you set a goal, and if the child meets this goal and stays focused for a certain amount of time, then they get to hatch a dinosaur egg, which is super exciting for the little kids. And I would like to share with you a great tool for students who need manipulatives for math, and that is the mathlearningcenter.org. And not only do they have great apps for iPad, but recently they added where you can open the web app on any device. So you can look for math clocks, you can look for number frames, money pieces, and any student who really just needs that manipulative to move around to help digest the math concept, this is a great website for them.
Wow, I told you, lots of good ideas from Jennifer. Wait to hear all of the other ideas coming from everybody else. But yeah, some really great ones in that part there. I like that mathlearningcenter.org resource because there are a lot of students who are on IEPs or whatever kinds of plans they might be on that have a requirement of manipulatives for math class. And now that they're at home, they don't have access to manipulatives they might have in their classroom. But we also know that those things are great for lots of learners. So this might just be a great resource for any math teachers out there just to use in the regular lessons that they're sending home to their students. Also, those the idea of setting a timer and the idea of using that Hatch app, like she said, those could be used with any students, whether they have identified special needs or not, just to help the kids focus on their schoolwork. But Jennifer wasn't done there. Oh no, she had more to share. So this last response I'm going to share from Jennifer is going to help if you actually see the video to it too. So I will make sure I link that Flipgrid video in there because she's talking about a specific template that she made. So if this idea that she shares here seems like something that you would benefit from, go to the show notes, click on the flipgrid.com link that's there within the resources from Jennifer, and you'll be able to see what she's talking about in the actual video. But let's go ahead and hear it right now.
I like for kids to not be online as much as possible during this home learning time. If their method of delivery is already going to be online, then let's have them process information, especially our special needs children, offline. So I would have them draw this on a piece of paper, and this would be a form of sketch notes for a fiction book that they would be reading. And basically it's sketch noting, but with a purpose. And so for each chapter in their book, or if it was a picture book, then just the whole picture book, I would have them sketch in each of these 4 areas. And that would help them to process and think through pictures, but with a focused area to process the book while they're reading.
So what I love about this response from Jennifer is exactly what I loved from her appearance on that Shake Up Learning podcast episode that I mentioned, which, by the way, is linked in the show notes. And that's that she's not really speaking directly about the technology itself. She's just speaking about things as an educator. And that's that point that, you know, she wants the technology to have a purpose. She wants, when it needs to be technology-based, it is. But when it could be done off a screen, it should be. And I totally agree with her. I was talking with my own kiddos. You know, it's really not healthy for a kid to be on a screen more than a few hours over the course of a day, and they shouldn't be on a screen more than like an hour consecutively during the day. So I tell my son, like, hey, you've got things like reading a regular book that's not on a screen. You need to intersperse that in, you know, within your other activities that you're doing throughout the day, so you're not spending massive amounts of time online or looking at a screen all consecutively. So I really like what Jennifer's saying here, which is when she could have the kids processing information and the screen is no longer necessary, why not use some kind of graphic organizer that the kids can write on with paper? And so she's providing a great template to her students. The nice thing about the one she shares is that while kids could print it out and use it as is, it was not super complex. There was not a lot of words on it. So the kids could just sketch it out on a piece of notebook paper. So if you're very interested in it, click on that link that's in the show notes and you'll be able to see the video and see the template she's referring to. But the general idea, I think, is that if your method of the delivery is already going to be online, let's have them process information offline, is what she said in there. And that just means when online isn't necessary, do things offline. So provide intentional opportunities to do things on pencil and paper or, physically when possible. So let's now jump over to a different responder, which is Catherine Day. Let's see what Catherine had to share.
Hey, Jake, it's Catherine. That's a really good question. And I think that we can do two things. First, the student's IEP team needs to meet remotely and discuss how they can get the accommodations and modifications that the student needs to translate into the online forum. Secondly, I think what needs to happen is that teachers need to use UDL in order to meet that student's needs. So in my opinion, those are the two main things that could be done to help students with special needs that are going into the online forum. All right, there you go, Jake. Have a great day.
So Catherine makes two great points there in her response. The first was meet with the professionals that are involved with the student to plan out what you're going to do in this setting. If this is an actual IEP situation, you had a meeting with a group of professionals to identify what's best for this kid, and now the scenario has changed. So it's probably best practice to discuss with those professionals once again, now in this current learning environment, what exactly should we be doing to support this kid? What is the most realistic and effective and efficient way that we can meet this kiddo's needs? And speaking of needs, the second thing she talked about was universal design for learning. If you're not familiar with UDL, you should look into it. The definition for UDL coming from CAST, which is the Center for Applied Special Technology at Harvard, I believe it is, which was the group that, as far as I know, started the work on UDL. Anyhow, their definition is universal design for learning is a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. So Catherine makes a great point there. We really should be thinking about what we know from science are best to optimize and improve our teaching to reach all of our learners. So thank you for that, Catherine. Now we're going to jump over to some responses from David Allen, and David responded multiple times on the grid because he just had so much goodness to share. So let's check out what David has to share.
Hey Jake, hey Duct Tapers. My name is David Allen. I live a little bit south of Louisville, Kentucky, and I am a special ed consultant. So I was very happy to see this prompt. The first thing we need to look at is we need to look at the IEPs of the students. What is the SDI for that student? What are the accommodations for that student? If your district is in a remote learning, or as we call it NTI, non-traditional instruction, your district is still required to provide FAPE to that student. So when you look at accommodations, you look at modifications. The difference between accommodations and modifications are accommodations is how the students are taught. Modifications are what the students are taught. So that's two different things. Usually we'll find them in the SDI, the accommodations, or the SAS section of the IEP. So if you have a student with an IEP, you probably need to be looking at that. So let's talk about how we can modify. So what are we modifying, or what are we accommodating? There are four different ones. Really, with this one, we're only doing three. You're going to modify or accommodate content, process, or product. It's kind of is what you're doing. So how are we going to do that? Well, one of the ways that I've been advocating is for our teachers to be using Google Classroom. The reason we are using Google Classroom is that you are able to assign work individually. You can assign work as a class, you can assign work to groups or groups of students, or you can assign individually. So for our related service people who may only have, may only see a student one-on-one, I've been advocating for them to tag into someone's Google Classroom, assign work individually for that student. When you do that, the only person that sees that stream notification is the student. So there's one way to get work out just to that student.
I'm going to jump into David's answer here before I let him share the rest of his content here, because this is such a great idea to make sure we're using the tools that we have available to us to differentiate what we're sending home to these students. We should always be doing that, but certainly now in this situation, we need to be doing that. He mentioned that with Google Classroom is great for doing that, but Every learning management system that I'm aware of allows you to do that. And if you don't have a learning management system that does, then you should probably be finding your own way of doing that, whether you're sending homework home or work home in docs and you send a different doc to a different group of kids. But whatever you need to do, you need to find some way to differentiate it for these kids, if appropriate, if that's what that student needs. That's kind of what we're doing in this episode is we're going over if the kid needs this, do this. If the kids need that, do that, and things like that. And one final thing I want to point out, somebody asked me on Twitter the other day, if I create a new section for differentiated assignments and only assign those assignments to a certain group of kids, do the other kids see that section there at all? And the answer is no, they don't see the assignments nor the section. If the section is empty for them, they won't even see the section there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the answer that I heard on Twitter when this question was brought up. Let's hear what else David has to say.
Okay, so we know with Google Classroom, we can go ahead and assign individual or group work. Go into Google Classroom, assign it, put it so it makes a copy for each person. That way you're not going to have the floating heads pop up and say who has this assignment. So, what is this work going to look like now? What's it going to look like for a student who has a reader? It's one of the more time-intensive accommodations. It's going to look different. It's going to look different based on, what you're doing. Do you have access or does the student have access to the digital copy of the textbook? A lot of times those are already recorded and the student can listen to them. Do you have an audio recording that they can listen to? You still got to follow copyright, but is there a way that the student can listen to an audio recording of whatever you want them to read? Does the student have a screen reader? Do they have Snap and Read? Do they have Read and Write? Does the student have a Chromebook? The Chromebook comes already with like 13 different accessibility features built in. All you got to do is turn them on. One of the accessibility features is Select to Speak. So basically, you highlight what you want, you hit search S, and it will read whatever you want it to read. So if the student has a Chromebook at home, they can turn that setting on. If they do not, one of the options is recording yourself in, WeVideo, Loom, Screencastify, and either embedding that video or pulling the audio out of that video and embedding it into the assignment. Google Slides is a great example of doing this. You can put the assignment in on one slide or on half a slide, and then go ahead and embed your audio next to it. Then the student has whatever is needed. You can have directions, you can have the passage. So the student has whatever is needed already read for them. So hopefully if you have a co-teacher, your co-teacher is taking care of this for you. But if not, you will have to make the recordings and embed them into the assignments or give them to the student in a way where they can access them.
Okay, so let's talk about a few of the awesome things that David shared there. First up, he mentioned the digital copies or audio copies of textbooks, and I wanted to point out that he made a great point. You still do have to follow copyright rules, but I wanted to also point out that a lot of different publishers and authors have given permission to teachers to record themselves or broadcast themselves reading their works. So if you have a book that you normally would read to your students, or that your students need to read, that you have some students who might need it read aloud to them, check into it. There's very high possibility that those publishers or authors have given permission for educators to do that, and you might just have to say at the beginning of your recording or broadcasting of it or whatever that you have permission from the author to be doing this during this special time. The next thing I want to point out is he mentioned two different tools there. First one was Snap and Read, and I put a link to their website in the show notes, snapandread.com. Snap and Read does not appear to have a free version. That looks like they have a free trial on their site. They look like they're relatively inexpensive. Looks like $4 a month, and they do have a Contact Us link on their page, so you can check them out. He also mentioned Read and Write. Read and Write is the one that I am familiar with. Read and Write has a free version for students that I think only gives them the text-to-speech, which is great. That might be what you're here for. That might be what you need. They have a lot of other tools that are in the premium version that you have to pay for. Fairly priced, but it's something that your district is probably going to have to go through, or your school is going to have to go through the process of getting pricing for. But it does look like you could do a pilot of it or a trial of it for free right now, so that might help you during this difficult time. Teachers are free with read and write all of the time for good, but in this situation, it's the students that you really want to have that free access, so you'd want to look into that. But I put a link to them in our show notes as well. Okay, so David has some more to share. It's all good stuff, so I'm glad that he shared all this stuff and I can feature it and help you guys all out with it. So let's hear what else he has for us.
One thing I wanted to mention as well is if you're a Microsoft district, you have access to Immersive Reader. It is an amazing tool. Google, I'm a Google certified trainer. I work in a Google district. There is an official Immersive Reader for Google Chrome, but it only works on websites. So there's one of the limitations right now for that. Flipgrid does have Immersive Reader. Wakelet has Immersive Reader to an extent. Again, will not work in Google Docs for that. So we talked about Reader. So let's talk about now one of the other bigger accommodations, and that's Scribe. So when people ask me how to accommodate with the Scribe, the first thing I will ask them is, what are you assessing? Are you assessing comprehension, or are you assessing handwriting? Most of the time they will tell me comprehension, and I will tell them, then let's leave the pencil down and let's look at video. So one of the things we can do for a Scribe is we can let the students screencastify themselves or Loom or WeVideo and basically screencast themselves, giving you the answer from your prompts and then sharing that with you. Now, another thing they can do, or another thing you can do, is set up a Flipgrid, and they go into Flipgrid like we're doing right now and give you the answer in Flipgrid. I mentioned Chromebooks earlier. Chromebook has a great dictation feature built in, so that basically that speech-to-text function is there for you. If your students do not have that, or they're on a desktop or a laptop, go into Google Docs, go into Google Slides, and you can use the voice typing function. It basically is, Control-Shift-S. In Google Docs, you can just roll with it. In Google Slides, it's limited to speaker notes. I gave the keyboard shortcut, but basically it's in the Tools menu in Docs and in Slides.
Didn't I tell you that David has a lot of awesome stuff to share? And again, like I said earlier, you might not need all of those things, at least not right now while you're in this remote learning situation. But thinking about the students that you have and that you're dealing with, which ones of those do you maybe need to put into place? So in the show notes, I put in links for everything he talked about. So the first thing in that segment he talked about was Microsoft's Immersive Reader. I put a link to a video from Microsoft EDU in there. He mentioned the Chrome extension that uses Microsoft's Immersive Reader. I put a video in there from Joe Marquez on the Sons of Technology YouTube channel about how to use that. He talked about scribing. He talked about using Screencastify or Loom or Flipgrid. I put in links to all of those. He talked about voice typing on the Chromebook. I put in a link to an article about that. And he talked about voice typing in Google Docs or in Google Slides speaker notes, and I put in a link for that as well. Okay, now in the last little segment of David's video, he's not sharing specific tools that you could use, but some strategies you could use. And there's some really good ones in here, ways that we could design our assignments to support these students. So take it away, David.
So what's a strategy that we can use when students are composing? The student has to produce some kind of writing for this assignment. I think with Google, with G Suite, being able to share a doc or being able to share a slide is really going to be your best friend during this remote learning. Put in the prompt. If the student has a editing checklist and you can get that into a PNG or a JPEG format, you can go ahead and insert that into the document as well. As the student is typing or composing the assignment, you can go in real time and highlight things and use the comment feature to go back and forth and give real-time feedback to that student of what needs to be worked on, what are the positives, what are the weaknesses of that writing piece. You can also give the student a word bank as well in there. I think one of the things that we do not use when we are composing, a lot of times we always go to docs. Well, I think you can really think outside the box and use slides. Split your slide in half. In one half, put in your editing checklist, put in your graphic organizer, put in your instructions. On the other side of the slide, give them a text, give them a text box. Let them use that instead of docs to type in. Now, if they need to have, their dictation, they're going to have to use docs unless you're going to let them use the speaker notes in slides. You can also, embed your audio or your video as well in slides. So you can actually video the instructions, screencast yourself doing the instructions, or just, use the audio for the instructions and embed that in slides as well.
Goodness, so much great knowledge coming from David, and we're going to feature a little bit more of his responses later on in the show. But right now I want to jump over to a different duct taper. This is Hillary Goldthwaite-Fowles, and I reached out to Hillary specifically on Twitter because I knew how well-versed she was in assistive technologies. I knew that she would have some great stuff to share, and she did not disappoint. So let's hear what Hillary has to share.
Hey everyone, my name is Hillary Goldthwaite-Fowles. I am an assistive technology specialist in Kennebunk, Maine, and a special education consultant. I'm also an adjunct faculty at the University of Maine at Farmington and the University of New England's programs in online learning. So online learning is something I'm pretty familiar with. So designing, it is not just flipping a switch. It is designing with intention. So how do we support our learners with special needs? We design with intention first. If you're not familiar with the National Center for the Accessible Educational Materials, the AIM Center, get familiar with them. They have wonderful webinars they're doing every Tuesday afternoon. We are designing for accessibility first. So those supports that are needed, whether it's assistive technology or smaller things broken down or schedules or things, they're already part of the learning experience in the least restrictive part. So in that tier 1, it's there. So make sure that you're designing with that in mind and check out those webinars. They're every Tuesday. You can go to the AIM Center website and follow that as well. Also, give kids time and let them use their assistive technology. Don't do something new. This is such an upheaval for our kids. Try and keep things as consistent as possible. But also think about this. We're MacGyvering things right now. Do it well and do it with your best intention. Also look to the Council for Exceptional Children's guidance and use the tools that you currently have. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and make it overly complicated. Simple things, one step at a time. Hangouts and the Google platform that we use in our district have been super helpful for us. Learning the accessibility settings on your device is important, whether it's using dictation, speech to text. We use read and write for Google Chrome. We're using Flipgrid a lot for student engagement and to promote inclusivity so that kids are feeling like they're a part of a community and a learning community. And remember this, embrace variability. It's important. Also UDL, Universal Design for Learning. Look at cast.org. Great resources, and I hope you're all well and safe. Take care.
Aren't you glad that I reached out to Hillary? I'm so glad that she had the time and was able to take the time out to share with us here on the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Such valuable material. I put Hillary's Twitter handle and website in the show notes, as well as that quote that she said at the beginning, which I just had to type it word for word. She said, designing online instruction is not just flipping a switch. It is designing with intention. So how do we support our learners with special needs? We design with intention first. Awesome, Hillary. Thank you for that. And then all of the things she talked about, like the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials, which is called AIM, and it's through CAST. I put a link to their site in there. The Council for Exceptional Children, I put in there. I put in a link to Read and Write, which we mentioned earlier, and Flipgrid, and UDL, the CAST site that goes over what UDL is. I put links to those things in there as well. Let's jump over to one last response before we get back with Beckett to do some which of the following would be less torturous. This next response comes from loyal duct taper and my buddy Matt Meyer, who shares a couple of different things that he does in his 6th grade classroom. I believe it's 6th grade. One note about the things that Matt shares, there are video versions of what Matt's sharing, so I'm going to put the links to the Flipgrid videos in the show notes in case you want to see the actual assignments that he's talking about. Let's hear what Matt has to share with us.
Hey Jake, Matt Meyer here, 6th grade teacher in Illinois. And I think that question is extremely important and relevant in today's learning environment for providing support for those students that might need, more support than other students on a day-in-and-day basis. So I think for me, it's going back to the principle of knowing those students by name and need and providing them with a activity, providing them with a learning environment that is suitable for what they need to be successful. And for me, in my classroom, it comes down to modifying work so they can be successful. So in this activity, it's an EDU protocol activity called Iron Chef, in which they're answering a essential question. How did geography influence or affect the way of life in ancient Greece? And you can see each student has their own slides. And as I scroll down, you'll notice that some of the other slides are different than the others. So it was a simple modification, taking away one required picture and then providing the students with key vocabulary terms as well as sentence starters that they can use in order to be successful in answering that essential question. So it comes back down to doing the same practices that we have been doing since the fall, modifying the work so they can be successful. And with G Suite and slides and docs, it's a very easy thing to do.
So Matt's answer talks about how he's modifying something that we're all familiar with here on the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, the EDU protocols, because we had co-author of the EDU Protocols Field Guide, Edition 1 and 2, John Carippo, on the show last spring, and we talked about a couple different EDU protocols back when John was on, but Matt is talking about one that we didn't talk about with John, which is the Iron Chef Edgy Protocol. So I put a link to that Edgy Protocol into the show notes so you can check it out. I also put a link to Matt's video in there, and essentially what Matt did was he assembled what the slide would look like for a student of normal ability with no special needs, and then he took out certain elements of it that he felt were unnecessary for his students with special needs. Now, I know there are different types of accommodations and modifications that we make. This is the one that Matt's making in this situation, but I like the point that he has here, which is it was really easy in slides to make it the way he really wanted it, and then to just kind of copy that slide and make the modifications he wanted to make for students who needed them. And he can make different modifications for different students, all starting with that same base slide. Okay, his next answer is similar. Let's go ahead and check that one out now, too.
Hey, Jake, just wanted to continue my conversation on being able to easily modify work within G Suite. For this particular activity, it is the same activity for guided reading. You'll see we have day 4 of guided reading here, and then day 4 for guided reading here, which is the modified version. So 2 students would get this one. 21 students would get this one. As you can see from the outset, they look pretty similar, but one of the biggest differences is the amount of work, again, that I'm requiring of them to complete. So in the first one, they're required to create a 3-slide comic, and then I just gave a simple visual that they can use to help them add the background that they need. On the other modified, I was a little bit more specific in the directions. As you can see here, I went ahead and added characters pre-created for them, and I grouped them with the text box to help them kind of add those characters to the comic, as well as a GIF created in Screencastify to show them how they can go ahead and add the new slide of the comic and then use these pre-created characters that are already in the Google slide and then add them to their comic and then simply input the text that they want to answer the question for the assignment. So being able to think ahead, knowing what those students need, and then pre-creating it for them so it's very easily manageable for them and less stressful so they can be successful.
Great stuff shared by Matt. So glad that he was able to get a response in there to share with you guys. Again, I'm going to say it again. There's a lot of stuff being shared here in this episode. And the point is, just like we always talk about, to listen to the different ideas out there, identify the ones that meet the needs you have, and kind of just ignore the ones that meet needs that you don't have currently in your classroom or with your group of students. Maybe not ignore them, maybe just like put them away for storage for a later date. We talk about that famous Maya Angelou quote, which is, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. So right now I'm helping you know better by sharing all these things with you, but some of these things that you now know aren't helping you do better. You don't need those things. So take the ones that you need now and run with them, and the other ones maybe you can come back and revisit later. At this time, let's stop with the educational duct tape stuff. Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's take a little break. Beckett is going to join me. We're going to do a little more, which of the following would be less torturous, and then we'll get back to some more learning after that. I think that you all deserve a chance to laugh and giggle and have a little bit of fun, so that's why this is included here for you. But if the learning is the real important part and all that you're here for, you could jump ahead about 5 minutes, maybe 5.5 minutes to get back to the other educational duct tape stuff. But come on, you want to have some fun and laugh, right?
Which of these things do you consider to be less torturous?
Okay, I'm back with my buddy Beckett, and we're going to answer some more. We're going to respond to some more. Which of the following would be less torturous questions? I was telling Beckett, who's a kindergartner, that we did 3 questions earlier, and we're going to do 3 questions now. And how many questions altogether is that, Beckett? 6. You got to lean up by the microphone, though, buddy.
Okay, then 6.
6. Good job there, buddy. So we're going to listen to 6 total. We already listened to 3, so 3 to go right now. So up next, our next one to listen to is my friend Angela Green and her dog Gus. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Beckett. This is Angela Green from north of Dayton, Ohio. And this is my new puppy, Gus. And we're here to answer your question, which would be less torturous, being a giant stink bug or a little tiny elephant? Well, big kiss right there from Gus. We've chosen that less torturous would be little tiny elephant, because look how cute this little tiny elephant is. This is Gus's little tiny elephant tool. You want it? You want it? Of course you do, because it's so cute. Who wants a giant stink bug? Nobody wants one. Nobody wants to be one. Why all the stink bug questions, Beckett? What is your fascination with stink bugs? I am over the stink bug questions. I think it was you that had the stink bug question last week. Anyway, hope you're having fun in quarantine.
So, well, Cohen did the stink bug question last week.
And then you just thought that was a fun question, so you started asking about stink bugs?
Yeah.
What did you think of her doggy Gus?
Yeah. Good.
Good? Was he cute?
Yeah.
Would you like to pet Gus?
Yeah.
Who's cuter, Angela's doggy Gus or our doggy Kermit? This Kermit. Is Kermit. Yes, Kermit wins. Sorry, Gus. You're pretty adorable. I like Gus's floppy ears. I think he looks snuggly.
But I like it when Gus yawned.
Yeah, Gus did yawn in the video. It was super cute, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's listen to another one.
And I'm spying on that little elephant.
That little elephant, Gus's little elephant toy. You're spying on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Lauren Hawkins, an instructional technology specialist working in Dallas, Texas, remotely, of course. The least torturous of those 2 options would have to be the tiny baby elephant. Let's face it, they're cute, adorable, everyone would want to love you, pet you, feed you. You'd be well taken care of as a baby elephant. I gotta say, that's gotta be the winner, right?
I would rather be a tiny elephant too, because they would be pretty cute, and if there would be a battle with a stink bug and an elephant, I probably would be on an elephant's team, because an elephant could sneak up into the stink bug's face and scare them.
Good plan, buddy.
Yeah!
Hey Beckett, my name's David Allen. I am a special ed consultant. I live a little bit south of Louisville, Kentucky. Well, I think for what I would find less torturous would be the small elephant. I figure if I'm a giant stink bug, then I'm going to have a giant stink. There's probably not enough deodorant or body spray in the world to help with that. So I'm going to pick the small elephant. Also, I will have a cool trunk to do cool things with it, and I will probably have a better memory. So I'm going to pick the small elephant. I will talk to everybody later. Bye.
Beckett, I'm pretty sure that when David responded to one of the questions last week, he was worried about being stinky when he was wearing, I think it was Parker's question about wearing some winter clothes in the summer, and David was worried he was going to be stinky. I think I'm a little bit worried David has a little bit of a complex about this stinky thing. What did you think of his answer?
Weird.
Weird?
Freaky.
It was weird and freaky? What was weird and freaky about it?
Beats me.
Oh, okay. You used up all your responses on the last one, huh?
Yeah, beats me.
Beats me. Okay. Thanks for being with us today, buddy.
Beats me.
Beats me. Do you have any last words of wisdom for everybody?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. That is a good word of wisdom. Wisdom is one of the best words of wisdom there is.
And freaky is.
Freaky is also a good one?
Yeah.
Any one, so that's your top two. What's your third favorite word of wisdom?
Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Cock-a-doodle-doo. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Man, I think I might have to hire Beckett as my future co-host. For those people who've been complaining in their Apple Podcast reviews that I don't have enough farm animal noises on the show, Beckett is the podcast co-host that you've been looking for the Educational Duct Tape podcast. We recorded that late last night as Beckett was nearing bedtime, so you could tell, I think he was waning by the end there. So we're going to get back to the Educational Duct Tape content now with some more really awesome tips for supporting students with special needs in remote learning. I've got to tell you, I was supposed to release this episode. My initial time that I was going to release it was 8 hours ago, and then my pushed back time that I was going to release it was about 4 hours ago, and now here I am still finishing recording part of it. And that's because of this has become part of our lifestyle during March and April of 2020. I had to stop recording because my wife, who's a school psychologist, had to have an ETR and an IEP and a 504 meeting, 2 different meetings. And so I needed to maintain the kids while she was doing that. So we played outside and had lunch and everything. And she wanted to use my desk with the podcast mic because who doesn't want to sound great in their IEP meetings? So there was an extended break before I came back to you. But I'm here now. I'm here and ready. And we're going to start off with some awesome shares from Lauren Hawkins. Take it away, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Hawkins. I am an instructional technology specialist working in Dallas, Texas. For accessibility features, we happen to have our elementary students working on the iPad. The iPad has a ton of free accessibility features that are automatically built into the screen. One of my favorites is just enabling voice dictation under your settings. This way allows students who are still early learners and those perhaps struggling with dyslexia to be able to speak their sentences and have it automatically typed out for them. It's a wonderful tool that really can help increase fluency, not only with students who struggle with reading and writing, but also those learners who speak other languages in our classrooms. The other one I really like that's under accessibility, still in the settings on the iPad, is the fact that you can have words read aloud to you. You can adjust the speaking rate, slow, fast. You can adjust the type of voice that's reading to you. It's really a nice feature that's built in. In my response, I went ahead and shared 2 quick videos and also a link to an iBook that is free for teachers that they can download in the App Store to help look at all the different accessibility features that are built natively into the iPad.
All right, so there's some great accessibility features built into the iPad that Lauren shared about. Most of them also work on iPhones, too. So if you have a parent who has their own iPhone and can use some of this stuff to support their kids, these are great options to use. I've put links in the show notes to the support article for using that voice dictation on the iPad and the read aloud mode on the iPad, which is actually, I believe, called voiceover mode. And then I put in the links to the 3 videos Lauren talked about. One is called Tools for Learning Reading. The next one is Tools for Learning Creating. And the last one is Tools for Learning Writing. And then there's also the free ebook by Morgan Cave titled Opening Doors to Access, and it's free on Apple Books. So some great resources to check out if you are an iOS user in your district. If you're not, you're going to want to check out some of this other stuff that Lauren shares. So take it away, Lauren.
Hi there, Lauren Hawkins again from Richardson ISD in Dallas, Texas. 2 of my favorite tools that offer accessibility features that are already built in is Flipgrid, which we're currently using, and Wakelet. Both have the Immersive Reader feature. This allows students to click on the Immersive Reader icon, and it's going to pop open and allow them to select words, have those words specifically read aloud, tell them the part of speech, which is a great connection, obviously. But even more important is that when they select a word, a picture dictionary option appears so that if a student is still unfamiliar with both reading and hearing the word read aloud, they can also get a picture to help clarify that word. Especially important for those ESL learners and anybody who's currently working on English as a next language. The last one I wanted to share is specific to Chromebooks. This one is called Google Read and Write, offered by Text Help. So I know this one may be very popular with teachers simply because it offers a lot of amazing features for students, including the ability to highlight text, the ability to have text read to them, either selected or the entire page. Also a picture dictionary, which when selected, they can hear the word read aloud to them as well. What I personally love as a previous math teacher is that if teachers are using the extension Equatio created by the same company, if they use any kind of math symbols, especially in all their in science and math, Google Read and Write will read the math symbols if they were created with their other program, Equatio. So having math being able to be read aloud successfully is a really nice option in the event that you are using Google Read and Write with the Equatio option. If you don't have Equatio, it is free for teachers. If you fill out their form, you can add math symbols into Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Forms, all the Googly things. So it's a really nice option if you haven't gotten a chance to explore it yet.
So Lauren shared 3 of my favorite accessibility tools there. The first being Immersive Reader, which is a free tool from Microsoft that also works as a Chrome extension like we heard about earlier. And it also is built into a number of tools, including Wakelet and Flipgrid, as she mentioned there. It's also built into Buncee and some other tools like the Microsoft suite of tools too. She also mentioned their Google Read and Write, which is a fantastic tool from TextHelp, and their math tool, Equatio, which is also an awesome tool. So now let's jump over to a different spot on the Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid and hear from Angela Green, who we heard from earlier with her puppy Gus. Let's see if Gus is joining her again as she shares some tips for supporting students with special needs in remote learning.
Hi, this is Angela Green again. I don't have Gus with me. He's laying on the floor eating and chewing up his elephant. I'm Angela Green 12 on Twitter, and my response to this prompt is as follows. I'm going to beat the Nearpod drum a little bit because that's what I do. Nearpod is my jam. But I'm going to say to teachers that are going to use Nearpod for this distance learning adventure that we're all on, and Nearpod is a great thing to use in student-paced mode. But what I want you to do is I want you to take your Nearpod, and whether you created that Nearpod using the Google Slides add-on or if you created it right in Nearpod, what I want you to do is I want you to edit that Nearpod. And on your text-heavy slides, I want you to edit those slides and use the little microphone, and I want you to add audio to those slides. You can read the text, or you can read the text and talk to your students. You can actually teach on each little slide, just little tiny 1 or 2 minute mini lesson. But the point is, add the audio overlay to each of your text-heavy slides to accommodate your learners that may have some special needs. And this is good for all learners. Now, if you have trouble doing that, I want you to reach out to me on Twitter at AngelaGreen12, and I will Google Hangout with you, and I will walk you through how to add audio overlays to any of your slides, your text-heavy slides.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. If you need support with adding audio overlay to any text-heavy slides in Nearpod or otherwise, reach out to Angela on Twitter. It's at Angela Green with an E on the end, 1212, and that is, as usual, in the show notes. And Angela and I are both big fans of Nearpod. She's a fan girl. I'm a fan boy. And I should point out that Nearpod, normally their student-paced version that Angela was referring to there is part of, I believe they call it the Gold edition. Silver is the free and Gold is the next level up. Normally, it's part of that Gold edition that you have to pay for, but during the coronavirus closures, it is free to use that, so it's a great feature to have access to during this time. But that's not all that we have today. Next up, we have Pam Hubler, previous guest on the show. She was on last spring at Special Techie, and she's got a couple quick things to share with us.
Hey everyone, this is Pam Hubler, or Special Techie on Twitter. I just wanted to give a quick tip for to help support students with special needs while they are remote learning. I would say the easiest would be to enable accessibility features on their Chromebooks, if they do have Chromebooks. And even most phones have an accessibility feature. Another tip would be in Google Docs or Google Slides, anything you happen to use, especially Google Docs, show them how to use the text or the speech to text feature. So that way, if they have to write something, it doesn't have to be super long. They can just click the little microphone and they can just start talking, and then they can always edit their writing after. So that's a good place to start.
I'm glad Pam reiterated those special accessibility features that are built into Chromebooks and built into Google Docs, as well as Google Slides, speaker notes, as David mentioned earlier in the show, because they are so valuable to all of our students. My third grade daughter actually was doing a writing assignment yesterday where she had to write quite a bit, and she has not had much practice at school with her typing skills. We're working on it at home a bit, but it was becoming a little bit tedious for her because she's using her home row keys with Daddy's coaching, but it's still a little bit painful. And I said, here, you know what? Let Daddy show you how to do that with your voice. And she's a responsible enough girl that she'll continue to work on her typing, but when she's at a frustration level and all the teacher wants to know is, what she's done, during the day, because it's like a journal entry, she's not worried about typing. So just getting the thoughts onto the document was always important. So I showed her how to use that voice typing. So I'm glad that Pam pointed that out. If you don't know how to use either of those things, the voice typing in Chrome or the voice typing in Google Docs, I've put links to both of those in the show notes. Now, I mentioned that David shared those earlier, and David also had a few other things to share. So let's listen to more of what David had to share with us.
So one of the things that I see now on Twitter is going into the master slide and embedding whatever your graphic is as the background so the students can't move it. I'm fairly techie. I really can't figure out how to do it that well. What I will do is I will take, say, my graphic organizer, and I will make it into a PNG or a JPEG file. I will insert that onto the canvas of my slide. I will make that cover the whole canvas. And then I will go into my shapes menu and insert a rectangle that covers that canvas, covers that graphic. I make my rectangle transparent with no border, and that way I can write on top of it. So I would do that for a student, and then I would create some rectangles on the side off the canvas, and I can use them as a drag and drop feature. So say on my graphic organizer, I am sorting different aspects, different attributes. You can go ahead and do a drag and drop for that, have the students drag keywords over into the correct section of the graphic organizer, and using that comment feature, give them back real-time feedback.
So David brings up a good point there. When you put activities in Google Slides, if there are images involved, especially if it's like a graphic organizer where there are text boxes and things like that, oftentimes students who are a little inexperienced with slides or maybe have a fine motor issue might have difficulties where they're accidentally moving around parts of your image or your graphic organizer or whatever it might be. So there are 3 different ways to resolve that. David suggests one, which is putting the images and text boxes and whatever that you want in there for the students to not change, and put a blank transparent rectangle in front of them so that the kids can't accidentally move the things behind the transparent rectangle. The other 2 options, one is editing the master slide, which, as David alluded to, is a pretty complicated process, or actually adding those images or whatever content you want to be kind of like the worksheet part of the slide in as background. So I've linked into the show notes. I've listed out what David's suggestion is, as well as 2 posts off of my blog about, number 1, how to edit the master slide, and number 2, how to add the images as backgrounds. Let's hear David's last thought, which is some ideas about using these slides in the classroom, well, in remote learning, I should say, for students with special needs.
You can also go ahead and put in text boxes on top of that transparent rectangle and have students either fill in the rest of, fill in those boxes, or you can go ahead and have text already in there and they're completing sentences or completing paragraphs. You can also create a close activity, put sentences into your Google slide, put a rectangle, a transparent rectangle over it, create your keywords, maybe they're vocabulary words, create them with shapes with rectangles too, and then you could create an activity where they're dropping those keywords into the correct space on the sentences. You could even create an activity where they are using the squiggle in the line tool to go in and circle correct answers or circle attributes or circle whatever you want them to circle.
Today's super secret code is tiny elephant. 2 words, tiny elephant. So head over to eduducttape.com/certificate and type in the super secret code, tiny elephant, in order to get your certificate of listening, laughing, and learning. Now, back to David.
So you can also use Google Slides to help chunk assignments. Suppose you have a Google slide and on one half you have questions. On the other side of it, you have embedded a video. Now that could be a video of you reading a passage, you giving instructions. It could even be an ASL interpreter interpreting your directions or translating a story passage that the student has to read because their first language is not English, it's ASL. So you can chunk that slide. Say you have 3 slides. Your video is 15 minutes. You go ahead and you put your video in, you go to format, options, you go to video playback, and that's where you can go ahead and assign a length per slide for that video. Say on your first slide that you want that video to play for 0 to 5 minutes. So you can go into those options, make that slide play for 0 to 5 minutes. On your next slide, you have questions that pertain to, minutes 5 through 10. So you go back into the video sections of that second slide, go into format options, video playback, and you can make that video on that slide play from minute 5 to minute 10, and you can repeat that for the third slide. Make that third slide minute 10 to minute 15. So you're only using one video, but you have basically broke that video up into 3 different assignments. So you can go ahead and share that slide out like that and give instructions to the students that on Monday you're going to do slide 1, Wednesday you're going to do slide 2, and Friday you're going to do slide 3. So one of my pro tips, as I like to call it, is basically create everything in one slide. And go ahead and that's your master copy. Go ahead then and create how many slides you're going to need as copies. Go through those copies and say it's 3 slides. So you're going to take away, 2 of the slides per copy. So let's say you have a slide with this slide 1 on it one day, slide 2 on it the next day, and slide 3 on the third day. You can go ahead then and, with those copies of just those slides, give that URL out, and that student is only going to go to that slide only, not the whole slide deck. So I hope some of these tips and some of these strategies will help you work with students with special needs. If you need anything else, you can reach out to me. My Twitter handle is @_David_Allen, ALLAN. If you need anything, I'll be happy to help you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
David, thank you so much for all the awesome stuff you shared today. You could tell David is well versed in accessibility features and in special needs and supporting them with educational technology. A great skill set to have and a great guy to have around to say, hey, David, record something for my show today. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, thank you, David. So we really appreciate all that stuff. That stuff in that last part there, he talked about using Google Slides to chunk assignments. He talked about it with videos where he's saying, if it's like a 15-minute video, put that video on 3 separate slides so that the first 5 minutes plays on the first one, the next set of 5 minutes plays on the second one, the next set of 5 minutes plays on the third one. I'll put some instructions into the show notes for how to do that in case you don't know. And the other thing he pointed out there at the end, I'm not sure if you quite caught exactly what he was saying there, but when you go into Google Slides and you navigate through the slides, the URL changes as you go through them. There's a little part at the end of the link that tells Google or tells Chrome or tells whatever browser you're in which slide of the presentation you're on. So what he's saying is you could actually make it as one long slideshow and just send out links to specific slides. Now, David's stuff was so awesome that he shared there that one of the other people who were featured in this episode saw one of his videos on the Flipgrid and actually responded to it. So here's Lauren's thoughts on that most recent video from David.
Oh man, Google Slides for the win for chunking information. I'm so glad that you shared this. It's definitely a really nice option that you can chunk the information. I love the suggestion of the ASL interpreter, especially if you have somebody reading it and then you have a video of an interpretation. I love that. I think that's going to be especially helpful for all of our really little learners because that's how a lot of teachers can do read alouds to their kids and not have to sit there and just listen to the voice, but they could see a picture of the passage and then they can actually see their teacher in a video reading that. So I'm definitely going to borrow that and share that with some of my teachers. I will say Keynote is really similar to Google Slides. If you have anybody on iPads in your district, they also have just a record audio option. So you can do a video or an audio or anything like that. I will say, to help kids not like move things around, I've always suggested to teachers, if you have dropped in a picture, to drop it into the background of the slide so that in the event a student makes a copy, they can't like click and drag and accidentally delete a passage. So that's also one of my favorite shortcuts.
All right, great stuff from Lauren there, sharing her appreciation of what David shared, and then also a tip about how to do that also in Keynote. So if you are a Keynote user, she recommends, instead of needing to put something over top of the image or anything like that, that you can actually just drop those images into the background, which actually you can do in Slides too, but a good tip knowing how to do it in different platforms. So I have to tell you before we wrap up that as I've been going through this and listening to these and editing this episode together and putting in my parts and things like that, I've been making the show notes and putting in lots of links for you guys so you don't have to go and Google things. And it's been funny, multiple different times I've been looking for a resource. Like the one time I was like, I need to find a resource on somebody's website about editing the master slide. And I try to find resources from people's sites I trust. So I'll look at Eric Kurtz's website, and I'll look at Matt Miller's website, and I'll look at all these different people's websites, and not just some random person, but somebody that I know and trust and want to share the resources from. And I was like, I can't find a good one for a master slide. And guess whose website I found one on? This Jake Miller guy, and not the one that was in the episode earlier, me. I was like, I made a GIF about this like 2 years ago, so I put that one in there. And the same thing happened when David brought up linking to specific slides using the URLs. I made a GIF about that like 4 years ago, so I linked that into the show notes. That is officially when you know you've been doing this stuff for a long time, when you can't remember what blog posts and GIFs you've made and written and things like that. Have I done that before? Was that me? That was me. Nice. Awesome. Well, that does it for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed all these tips. I'm sorry it went a little bit long, but I think that's actually a really good thing because it was long and it was jam-packed with lots of information. Please, please, please don't let yourself be overwhelmed by this information. Please latch on to one or two things that you could put in your practice right now and maybe save the other things for later and come back to these regularly and add them in one at a time. Really think about what exactly are the pain points or needs in your classroom that you need to resolve. Which one of these things do you really need to put into practice in your class right now? Especially with you being at home and your students being at home, it's difficult to put in anything new, if anything at all. Try to only do one or two. All right, well, that does it for episode 40 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. If you asked me 14 months ago what episode 40 would look like, I would not think it would be about something like this. Nobody could have ever thought it was about this, but I am just trying to help. I hope this was helpful for you, and if you found it helpful for you in guiding your work that you're doing in this remote learning, please share it with other educators that you know need this support, whether they work directly, specifically with special needs students, or whether they are a regular education teacher who might need some support in that area. Please share this out and help them, because I am so proud to be the curator of all this wonderful information that these people shared. I didn't really have a whole lot of answers for today's show, but gosh, did I find the right people to share some, didn't I? I hope that you will join us next week on Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our chat, where we will talk about some of these different topics. If you've used some of them, it'll be your chance to share about how they go. If you have other ideas that we didn't cover, it'll be your chance to share those as well. I will also have a mini episode for you next Wednesday in the morning with my buddy Dan Stitzel, so be on the lookout for that. Please subscribe to the show to make sure you don't miss those episodes as they come out. And then the following week, which I think is April the 15th, we will have Catlin Tucker for us with an interview we did before all of this remote learning stuff really, truly started in earnest here in America. But I'm really excited to share that interview with you because Catlin is just so awesome. So I can't wait to share that one with you 2 weeks from today. Don't forget to claim your certificate of listening, laughing, and learning if you want one, if you want to get some PD credit for listening. If not, it's okay, but I put them there just in case you could use them. Please, again, make sure you subscribe to the show to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And most importantly, stay well. Take breaks to find your smile and to find your joy, and don't put too much pressure on yourself. Remember, we are better together, and we will get through this together. I hope that you all have a great day, and I will see you in a fortnight.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please visit eduducttape.com to join the discussion, share possible topics, inquire about being a guest, or contact Jake. And remember, duct is spelled with a T, not a quack quack K.
Cock-a-doodle-doo, 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 cock-a-doodle-doo.